Roughly 1 year ago, my family decided to adopt a dog from an animal shelter down south. So my dad and I chose to take a road trip to the backwoods of Sale Creek, Tennessee, where we picked up our dog, Katya. As we drove through a narrow dirt road lined by houses, we noticed that each house flew a Confederate flag. Being African American, we grew silent and gazed at each other with nervousness in our eyes. We both felt something. We felt unwelcome. We felt a hint of fear. We feel something when we see symbols. A red cross might make us feel safe, or a yellow warning sign might make us alert. Well, the same applies to symbols of history. In fact, there are historical symbols that tap into sensitive parts of our national, racial, and ethnic identities. For example, many of us know the story of Christopher Columbus, the man who discovered America. On the other hand, Columbus and his team enslaved millions of natives of the West Indies. Even though Columbus sought riches, he had no mercy for the millions of natives which he ordered to kill, torture, and rape in the most brutal of ways. And yet today, the invincible figure is showcased throughout communities within America. In 1861, the Civil War began, a conflict between northern states, the Union, and southern states, the Confederates. The South, led by General Robert E. Lee, depended heavily on black slavery as a resource for a running economy, while the North, led by General Ulysses S. Grant, was in support of the overall abolishment of slavery. However, even after the North's victory, the diseased idea of racism festered in America. Today, many Americans continue to fly the Confederate flag, look up to Confederate monuments, and take the day off on Confederate Memorial Day. But that begs the question, what do these historical symbols stand for, and do they reflect the moral values of America as a whole? Let's take a look at this. According to the New Heresy, published by the Southern Punch, a satirical newspaper article of 1864, Southerners agreed on a doctrine that stated the following: "We are fighting for the independence that our great and necessary domestic institution of slavery shall be preserved, and for the preservation of all other institutions of which slavery is the groundwork." So, despite there being some misguided debate over why the Civil War was fought, there's no dispute over why Confederates flew their flag. In fact, the Robert E. Lee statue is an example of an individual who fought for these values, the preservation of slavery and racism. On August 12th of this past year, a Unite the Right rally began in response to a group of protesters urging for the taking down of a Robert E. Lee monument in Charlottesville, Virginia, or what is now called Emancipation Park. The Unite the Rights rally consisted of alt-right individuals, including Ku Klux Klan members and torchbearers waving the Confederate flag, shouting, "You will not replace us." The key idea here is not whether or not the statue should be removed, but how exactly the Unite the Rights argued against the removal of the statues. The Unite the Rights exposed the bigotry behind the values of keeping the monuments themselves, and their point of keeping these monuments was to uphold Confederate heritage. Now, many of us learned the difference between right and wrong at a young age. But does this reflect Americans' decisions to prioritize morality in today's world? This past year, a white supremacist shot and killed 9 black parishioners at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. The mass shooter is an example of one individual who went through great lengths to uphold Southern heritage. Now, the idea of Southern heritage is a common stance for Confederate symbols. Ben Jones, official of the Democratic Congressman of Georgia and official of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, argued in a New York Times article that, and I quote, "The Confederate flag is a symbol for people who fought for what they believed was right in their time." Well, these people fought for a side that could not see past hatred and racism. In fact, there's a fine line between respecting a lost Confederate soldier and celebrating racist Confederate ideals. So in this case, Confederate commemorations are a veil to cover a racist view. Despite this hatred still lingering within America, it is evident that change is wanted. I grew increasingly disturbed by what I had seen regarding the spread of hatred in America. I decided to ask my classmates a few questions regarding the social issue. I wanted to evoke a connection between my peers and an issue of their time, particularly racism in America. I found that greater than half my peers agreed that Columbus Day is offensive to some individuals, and half found that Americans should not take pride in the Confederate flag. Now, what this showed me was that a handful of these students took the time to reflect upon history from multiple perspectives and formulated a skeptical opinion. Now, in Los Angeles, Columbus Day is not celebrated, nor is it abolished. It is recognized parallel to Indigenous Peoples Day, making the public aware about the conquerors and victims of the historical event. Imagine Newburgh had taken a similar action regarding Washington's headquarters, for example, making the public not only aware of George Washington's achievements, but also educating the public about the slave owning side of his life. When I look back at my survey, I found that greater than 85% of the students agreed that a new holiday or a parallel holiday to existing historical holidays that promotes tolerance and acceptance would benefit America in moving away from racism and those aspects of history. Now, although racism is an issue that may most likely not resolve completely, there are 3 steps we can take to move forward from history, racism in history. First, understand all sides. It's important that we view history from multiple perspectives and that we don't engage in a one-sided viewpoint. 2, create a parallel. It's not necessary for us to eradicate certain holidays. In fact, we don't want to forget history. We want to remember every part of it. But it is again necessary that we make note that there are conquerors and victims of most historical events. And 3, celebrate change. It's vital that we make note of the advances America has made in promoting equality and acceptance. We are moving forward from history. We're not taking steps backward. So overall, what can we take from this? We learn that it's important to critically think about what we believe, why we believe it, the morals behind those beliefs, how we ourselves see right and wrong, and how those around us see right and wrong, in order to move forward to a more accepting, welcoming, open-minded, and most importantly, compassionate world. Thank you.